Welcome to Nightmare Lullabies. Here, we bring you chilling tales to keep you on edge while helping you unwind. If you enjoy our stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Got a creepy story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We might feature it in a future video. Now sit back, relax, and let the story begin. Dana had always prided herself on her knack for finding hidden treasures online. Late one quiet afternoon, while scrolling through a popular classified ads site, she discovered an advertisement that immediately caught her eye. The listing featured a beautifully ornate vintage floor lamp with intricate metalwork and an antique charm that promised to add character to her modest new apartment. The price was remarkably low, so low, in fact, that Dana's first instinct was to double-check for any hidden catch. Still, the photos were detailed, the description convincing, and the seller, identified only as RJ, reassured her with a brief but polite message promising a quick local pickup. After weighing the risks against the lure of a great bargain, Dana arranged to meet RJ at a nondescript parking lot on the city's edge. The day of the meeting brought a mix of anticipation and mild anxiety. Dressed in casual clothes and clutching her phone for directions, Dana arrived at the designated spot. There, leaning against an old sedan, stood a man in his late 40s. His eyes were downcast, and his posture suggested discomfort with the situation. Without much small talk, he passed her a large, carefully wrapped package containing the lamp. In a low, hesitant tone, he murmured, "It's been in my family for years. I just want someone to take care of it." Although something about his voice made Dana's skin prickle, she managed a polite smile, exchanged cash, and accepted the purchase with a silent promise to herself that she'd be cautious about this deal. At home, Dana eagerly unpacked her new acquisition. The lamp's elaborate design immediately brightened her living room. Its warm glow and delicate details seemed to evoke a bygone era of elegance. For several days, everything appeared normal. Dana enjoyed the soft ambience the lamp provided, and it even became a conversation piece during small gatherings with friends. However, as the days passed, small anomalies began to emerge that gradually eroded the initial charm. One morning, while Dana was preparing her coffee in the quiet of her apartment, she noticed an unusual stain at the base of the lamp. At first, she assumed it was merely a blemish from transit or a smudge from handling. Yet, when she cleaned it carefully, the mark seemed to shift position ever so slightly. A few evenings later, as she relaxed on her sofa reading, the lamp began to flicker in a pattern that was irregular and unsettling. It wasn't a power issue, she had already replaced the bulb with a new one, but the fluctuations persisted, almost as if the light itself was trying to communicate something. Curiosity slowly transformed into unease. Dana decided to dig a little deeper. She began by examining the lamp more carefully. Under the soft illumination, she noticed a series of faint, almost imperceptible inscriptions along the metal frame. The letters were so subtle that she had to lean in close to decipher them. Initials, dates, and fragmented words that hinted at a long-forgotten story. Though Dana was not prone to superstition, the idea that this object might have a hidden past tugged at her analytical mind. Determined to uncover the truth behind her purchase, Dana embarked on an online search. She typed in the details from the inscription, cross-referenced vintage lamp catalogs, and visited local antique forums. Several posts mentioned similar items, and one thread in particular caught her attention. A discussion about a lamp that had been part of a scandal involving a wealthy family whose fortunes had crumbled amidst bitter disputes. According to the thread, the lamp was believed to have been in the possession of a man whose mysterious disappearance had long since become a local legend. Dana's heart pounded as she read through the posts. Although the details were murky and the sources unverified, the coincidence was too striking to ignore. In the following days, Dana's routine was punctuated by a series of small yet disquieting occurrences. Late in the evening, while working on her design projects, she sometimes thought she heard a soft tapping sound emanating from the direction of the lamp. When she turned her head, nothing was there, only the steady hum of the apartment and the gentle clatter of her keyboard. During phone calls with friends, she would absent-mindedly glance at the lamp, half expecting to see its inscriptions glow or shift. Her dreams became filled with vague images of a man's silhouette and whispered conversations that she couldn't quite catch. Unsure whether her mind was playing tricks on her, Dana decided to confront the issue head-on. One afternoon, she contacted the local antique shop that specialized in estate items similar to her lamp. She asked if they had ever seen a piece matching her description. The shop owner, a kindly man named Harold, listened intently before leaning forward and saying, "I believe I might have come across something like that many years ago. There was talk of a lamp that belonged to a troubled family, one that had experienced deep betrayal. The owner vanished under mysterious circumstances, and the lamp was said to carry a part of that legacy." Harold's tone was matter-of-fact, yet his eyes betrayed a hint of caution. "If you choose to keep it, be aware that sometimes the past has a way of catching up with us in unexpected ways." Though Dana found no concrete evidence linking her lamp to any unsavory events, Harold's words deepened her unease. She began to document the subtle changes she observed: the shifting stain, the flickering patterns, the barely readable inscription. With each note, her anxiety grew. The lamp, once a prized bargain, now felt like a burden, a relic imbued with secrets best left undiscovered. Unable to sleep one night, Dana sat at her desk, laptop open, and reread everything she had found online. A chill settled over her as she encountered a particularly disturbing detail. The initials on the lamp's base corresponded to a man who had been reported missing nearly a decade ago. The news had faded from public memory, but local archives still carried the story. A once prominent businessman whose life had unraveled amid scandal and whose disappearance remained unresolved. Dana's rational mind struggled to reconcile the possibility that her purchase might be linked to real, human tragedy. After a sleepless week filled with anxious nights and relentless research, Dana reached a breaking point. She composed a detailed message and posted it in a well-moderated online antique forum, asking if anyone could offer definitive information about the lamp's provenance. The responses were mixed. Some expressed skepticism, while others shared similar experiences with seemingly innocuous items that later revealed troubling histories. One user, signing off as History Lover, wrote, "Sometimes the most attractive deals come with strings attached. Be careful what you bring home." With mounting evidence and an inner voice that wouldn't let her rest, Dana resolved to confront the mystery directly. She decided to contact a local historian who specialized in the area's mid-century scandals. Dr. Evelyn Shaw, a soft-spoken academic with a reputation for meticulous research, agreed to meet with Dana at a nearby library. Over cups of lukewarm coffee in a quiet study room, Dana laid out her findings: the inscription, the online posts, the news clippings about the missing man. Dr. Shaw listened intently, her eyes narrowing as she flipped through some archived documents on her tablet. After a long pause, Dr. Shaw spoke. "There is indeed a record of a man by the name of Ronald J. Ellison, who disappeared under very troubling circumstances. His family was embroiled in bitter legal battles over an inheritance, and his sudden vanishing was linked to disputes that turned violent. It appears that your lamp may very well have been part of his family's estate." Her voice was measured, as if reciting historical facts rather than stirring modern fear. "I must caution you, however, objects like these carry more than just memories. They carry the weight of unresolved grief and anger." The gravity of Dr. Shaw's words sank deep into Dana's heart. With every new piece of information, the lamp transformed from a decorative object into a symbol of human frailty and the dark aftermath of familial discord. The once appealing bargain had become a mirror reflecting not just a forgotten tragedy, but the complexities of trust, loss, and the sometimes painful intersection between commerce and history. In the days that followed, Dana wrestled with a difficult decision. Should she keep the lamp and accept the burden of its past, or should she try to rid herself of an object that now felt like an unwanted inheritance of sorrow? The thought of returning it to RJ haunted her, especially after discovering that his online contact had been deactivated, leaving her with no way to undo the purchase. With a heavy heart, she eventually chose to leave the lamp where it was, but to lock it away in the back of her closet. In its dark confinement, it would serve as a silent reminder of the hidden costs that sometimes come with an irresistible deal. Over time, Dana began to rebuild her sense of normalcy. The disturbances around the lamp diminished, though the memory of its unsettling presence never fully faded. Instead, it became a quiet parable that she shared with friends who marveled at the serendipity of her find. while also recoiling at the dark undercurrents that often lurk behind too good to be true bargains. In her final reflection, Dana realized that the true horror was not in any ghostly force, but in the human capacity for secrets and the ease with which the past can intrude upon the present. Her experience with the unwanted purchase had taught her that every object has a history, and that sometimes the price we pay goes far beyond the cash exchanged. As Dana continued with her life, she kept a small journal where she recorded every detail of the lamp's behavior and her ongoing thoughts. The entries were filled with a mixture of regret, curiosity, and cautious acceptance, a testament to the enduring impact of choices made in moments of need and temptation. And so, the vintage lamp remained, tucked away in a shadowed corner of Dana's apartment, a silent guardian of forgotten memories, and a reminder that even the most attractive deals can carry a legacy of pain. Quentin Marshall had always been a diligent college student, but as finals approached, he found himself grappling with a critical problem. His aging laptop was failing him at the worst possible moment. Constant crashes and an unreliable battery were jeopardizing his coursework, and with his final projects looming, Quentin knew he had to act fast. Late one evening, while scrolling through Facebook Marketplace in his cramped dorm room, he spotted an advertisement that made his heart skip a beat. A listing for a high-end laptop, boasting specs that could easily handle his demanding software, all at an unbelievably low price. The ad was straightforward and professional. The seller, identified simply as Alec Renshaw, promised that the laptop was brand new, sealed, and available for immediate pickup at a location not far from campus. Though Quentin's instincts screamed caution, the allure of a bargain too good to pass up won out. After all, the prospect of a reliable machine at a fraction of the cost was irresistible. The following afternoon, Quentin arranged to meet Alec at a bustling cafe near the university, a public setting that lent a measure of safety to the transaction. Dressed in his best casual attire, and with a sense of nervous anticipation, he arrived at the designated time. There, he saw a man in his early 30s with neatly combed hair and a calm demeanor, waiting at a corner table with a travel mug of coffee and his phone in hand. The man introduced himself as Alec, and his polite, measured tone put Quentin slightly at ease. Over a brief conversation peppered with small talk about classes and local coffee spots, Alec retrieved a sleek, black laptop from his worn messenger bag. The laptop's exterior was immaculate. Its silver casing gleamed under the cafe's warm lighting, and the screen displayed a pristine welcome message. Satisfied with his first impression, Quentin exchanged a modest sum of cash with Alec. The transaction felt smooth and professional. Alec even handed him a small receipt, printed on thin paper, which read simply, "Sold as seen." With a friendly nod and a promise that everything was in order, Alec departed into the afternoon crowd, leaving Quentin with his new purchase, and an odd, lingering feeling that he couldn't quite explain. Later that day in his dorm room, Quentin eagerly unboxed the laptop and powered it on. At first, everything appeared perfect. The boot up was swift, and the operating system greeted him with an inviting interface. However, as he began to run his applications and transfer important files, anomalies emerged. The laptop would unexpectedly shut down mid-task, and when he checked the battery status, it reported an unnaturally short runtime despite being advertised as brand new. Quentin's curiosity and rising unease compelled him to check the serial number. A quick search on the manufacturer's website returned a baffling result. The serial number was not recognized in their database. His excitement rapidly turned into a sinking dread. Had he been scammed? He tried reaching out to Alec Renshaw through the contact details provided in the ad and the brief conversation at the cafe. Yet, to his growing alarm, his messages went unanswered. Even more unsettling was that when he attempted to search for Alec's profile on Facebook, the account appeared to have been deactivated or removed altogether. What had started as a dream deal was quickly morphing into a puzzle with more questions than answers. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Quentin began a methodical investigation. He revisited the cafe where the transaction had occurred, discreetly asking the staff if they remembered a man named Alec. One of the baristas hesitated before replying, "I think I saw someone like that a few weeks ago." He always kept to himself. This vague recollection did little to reassure Quentin, but it did confirm that Alec had indeed been there at one time, just not recently. At the same time, Quentin reached out to fellow students on various online forums, describing his experience without revealing too many personal details. To his dismay, several others reported similar encounters. They had purchased electronics or appliances from sellers with names like Alec or similar aliases, only to later find that the products were substandard or even non-existent in the manufacturer's records. A pattern was emerging, a network of phantom sellers who vanished without a trace once the cash had changed hands. Late one sleepless night, while Quentin pored over his laptop's unusual system logs and error reports, he discovered encrypted folders labeled with innocuous names like System Update and Diagnostic Data. When he tried to open them, he was met with a password prompt that he never set. The files themselves hinted at modifications not part of a typical software update. They contained strings of code and cryptic error messages that suggested someone had tampered with the system. The revelation sent a chill through him. Had the laptop been compromised intentionally to steal his data? Or was it part of a larger scheme? Realizing he needed expert help, Quentin reached out to a friend, Marcus, who was studying computer science and had some experience with cybersecurity. Over several hours of video calls and screen-sharing sessions, Marcus helped him trace the digital breadcrumbs left by the mysterious seller. They discovered that the IP address associated with Alec's account pointed to a series of burner phones and disposable email addresses. A sophisticated setup designed to vanish as quickly as it appeared. Marcus's investigation revealed an even darker possibility. This was not an isolated incident, but part of an organized scam targeting desperate students and bargain hunters. With mounting evidence, Quentin decided to compile his findings into a detailed report and share it on a dedicated forum for online fraud awareness. The response was overwhelming. Several other victims contributed their stories, and the collective evidence painted a chilling picture of a network of con artists exploiting online marketplaces. As the forum discussion grew, an anonymous user with a handle like Truth Seeker reached out to Quentin privately. This user claimed to have inside information on the operation, a loosely organized ring of criminals who used deceptive listings to offload subpar or even stolen electronics. According to Truth Seeker, the goal wasn't to provide a genuine product at a discounted price, but to collect cash and then disappear, leaving unsuspecting buyers with faulty devices that could be remotely manipulated or even used to infiltrate personal systems. Armed with this new information, Quentin felt both vindicated and violated. His sense of trust had been shattered, replaced by an acute awareness of the dangers lurking behind seemingly innocent online deals. The laptop, once a beacon of hope for his academic survival, had transformed into a harbinger of potential digital invasion and fraud. In an effort to bring some closure to the ordeal, Quentin decided to arrange one more visit to the cafe in an attempt to gather any additional clues about Alec Renshaw. This time, he arrived prepared with a recording device and a list of questions, determined to confront the mystery head-on. However, as he stepped into the cafe, the atmosphere was noticeably different, quieter, with a subdued energy that hinted at recent disruptions. The barista, recognizing him from his previous visit, frowned and whispered, "I haven't seen Alec around lately. He left a while ago, and no one really knows where he went." The conversation left Quentin with a profound sense of isolation, both from the scam and from a community that seemed unwilling or unable to help. The digital trail had gone cold, and Alec's contact details had evaporated into the ether. Yet, the sting of betrayal was unmistakable. He was left with a malfunctioning laptop, a ruined sense of security, and the haunting realization that even in a world governed by technology, human deceit was as potent as ever. In the weeks that followed, Quentin took deliberate steps to safeguard his digital life. He upgraded his cybersecurity measures, changed passwords, and even enrolled in a short course on online safety. His experience became a cautionary tale that he shared with classmates and on online forums, a narrative of how the promise of a perfect deal could quickly unravel into a labyrinth of digital deceit and human malice. Quentin's final reflections were somber. Late at night, as he sat at his desk in the dim light of his dorm room, he often stared at the malfunctioning laptop. a constant reminder of a vulnerability that lay hidden behind convenience and low prices. He recorded his thoughts in a journal, writing about the breach of trust and the pervasive sense of violation that had seeped into his life. In these moments of introspection, he came to understand that the true horror wasn't the technical glitch or the loss of money. It was the realization that someone somewhere had chosen to exploit the trust of people like him, using the vast anonymity of the internet to weave a web of scams that could devastate lives. The experience left Quentin with a lingering wariness, a heightened skepticism toward deals that seemed too good to be true. It also instilled in him a determination to educate others about the risks of online transactions and the importance of vigilance in the digital age. Though the memory of Alec Renshaw and the vanished seller haunted his online interactions, it also propelled him to become an advocate for safer online practices, turning a painful lesson into a mission to protect others from falling prey to similar deceptions. As the semester drew to a close, Quentin slowly began to rebuild his sense of trust, not in the abstract concept of online commerce, but in the tangible actions of communities and institutions dedicated to exposing fraud. His story, shared widely across campus and online, served as a reminder that behind every seemingly perfect deal might lie a dark, human secret waiting to be uncovered. Elena Marston, an independent writer struggling to break through a prolonged bout of creative stagnation, had long dreamed of a secluded retreat where she could finally let her imagination roam free. One chilly autumn evening, while browsing Craigslist in her cramped city apartment, she discovered an advertisement that seemed almost too perfect. A charming, isolated cottage nestled in the quiet countryside of Ashford Hollow, available for short-term rent at a very reasonable price. The listing promised rustic elegance, privacy, and ample natural light, all exactly what Elena needed to finish her novel. Intrigued by the prospect of escaping the relentless clamor of urban life, she quickly corresponded with the landlord, a reclusive gentleman who signed his messages simply as Bennett. Over a series of polite emails, Bennett described the cottage in alluring detail. Its weathered wooden exterior that spoke of years gone by, a cozy interior filled with antique furnishings, and wide windows overlooking rolling meadows. Convinced by his courteous tone and the enchanting images in the listing, Elena booked the cottage for a week, imagining that this sanctuary might be the spark to ignite her creativity. The day of her arrival dawned bright and cool. Elena drove along winding country roads until she reached a narrow gravel lane bordered by mature oak trees whose branches formed a natural archway. At the end of the lane, almost hidden behind a copse of birch, stood the cottage, its faded blue paint and time-worn details exuding a quiet dignity. Bennett greeted her at the door, a reserved man in his late 50s with gentle eyes and a faint, wistful smile. He handed her a set of keys and offered a brief history of the property. Once a beloved family home passed down through generations, it had seen both moments of joy and episodes of sorrow. His voice, calm yet tinged with melancholy, seemed to impart an unspoken warning that the cottage held more than just physical charm. Elena, eager to immerse herself in solitude and inspired by the rustic allure of the place, thanked him warmly and began her new life away from the city. In the first days, Elena settled into a comfortable routine. Mornings were spent writing on the sunlit porch, where the gentle chorus of birds and the soft rustling of leaves provided an almost meditative backdrop. Afternoons found her exploring the surrounding countryside, wandering along dirt paths that meandered through fields of wildflowers and over gentle hills that rolled into the distance. The cottage itself, though modest, was full of delightful quirks. A creaking floorboard that seemed to echo with distant memories, a quaint stone fireplace with an intricately carved mantel, and a small library of well-thumbed books that hinted at previous occupants who had perhaps once found solace within these walls. Yet, as pleasant as her initial experience was, Elena couldn't shake an undercurrent of unease that began to surface gradually. It started with small inconsistencies that she initially attributed to the natural quirks of an old house. One evening, while preparing a simple dinner in the compact kitchen, she noticed that a door she was sure she had closed was slightly ajar. When she went to shut it properly, she found a thin layer of dust disturbed on the floor beneath, as if someone had walked through moments before. At first, she dismissed it as a trick of her imagination, a result of her excitement and the isolation of the cottage. But over the next few days, similar occurrences began to accumulate. A chair that she had neatly tucked under a table would sometimes be found out of place in the morning. A window that had been firmly shut at dusk would be left slightly open at dawn, letting in a chill breeze that set her teeth chattering. Even more disconcerting were the whispers of voices she thought she heard late at night. A soft murmur that seemed to echo through the empty halls, words that were indistinct yet laden with an inexplicable sadness. Determined to put these oddities to rest, Elena attempted to rationalize each occurrence. Old houses, she reminded herself, were prone to such quirks, and perhaps the wind or the settling of the structure was to blame. Yet as the week progressed, the incidents grew too precise to ignore. While rummaging through a forgotten drawer in the study one afternoon, Elena discovered an old, faded photograph of a woman who resembled Bennett. The photograph, dated decades ago, showed the woman standing in front of the very same cottage, her eyes brimming with both hope and sorrow. Tucked behind the photo was a handwritten note in elegant script. "Remember always, the past lives in these walls." The discovery sent a shiver down Elena's spine. Though she was not given to superstition, the note imbued the cottage with a sense of lingering grief and unresolved history that she found both fascinating and unnerving. Late one evening, as a storm gathered outside and rain began to patter against the window panes, Elena sat in the study and resumed writing. The words on her screen flowed slowly, but her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knocking at the front door. Startled, she paused and listened. The knocking came again, measured, deliberate. Heart pounding, she rose and crept down the hall to peer through the peephole. Outside, illuminated intermittently by flashes of lightning, she could make out the vague outline of a figure standing on the porch. For a moment she hesitated, torn between the urge to confront the intruder and the fear of what she might find. Gathering her courage, she opened the door a crack. There was no one there, only the empty, rain-soaked porch and the echo of her own rapid breathing. Shaken, she closed the door and returned to her desk, but sleep eluded her that night. Over the following days, Elena's internal conflict deepened. She began to suspect that the cottage, for all its rustic charm, harbored secrets from its past that were not meant to be disturbed. In her attempts to uncover more about the property's history, she visited the local town hall and pored over old records. There, she learned that the cottage had once belonged to a prominent family whose fortunes had been marred by scandal and tragedy. A bitter divorce, a series of inexplicable disappearances, and ultimately, the mysterious vanishing of the family's matriarch. The records mentioned a woman named Adelaide, whose life had been intertwined with the fate of the house. The photograph she had found earlier bore a striking resemblance to Adelaide, suggesting that Bennett, the reclusive landlord, might be more closely connected to the house than he had ever let on. Confronted with this possibility, Elena arranged a meeting with Bennett, hoping for clarity. One crisp morning, she found him tending to a small, neglected garden behind the cottage. His face was serene, yet his eyes held a glimmer of sorrow that Elena had not noticed before. In a measured tone, she asked him about the photograph and the family history. Bennett's expression darkened for a brief moment before he composed himself. "This cottage has seen many lives, Miss Marston," he said quietly. "Some choose to remember, and some choose to forget. I merely try to keep the past at bay, though it often finds its way back into the present." His answer was vague, but laden with regret, a reluctant acknowledgement that the cottage was indeed a repository for unresolved grief. That conversation left Elena with more questions than answers. Each night, as she sat at her desk with the soft glow of the lamp and the rhythmic sound of rain in the background, her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Was the unease merely the product of her own imagination, fueled by isolation and the weight of expectation? Or was there a deeper, more human horror hidden in the silence of the cottage? A history of pain that had seeped into the very wood and stone? The answers were elusive. In her journal, Elena recorded her observations in careful, measured entries, noting every peculiar occurrence and every fleeting glimpse of a memory that might belong to someone long gone. By the end of her stay, the mystery of the cottage had transformed from a minor annoyance into an all-consuming presence. Though she never encountered any overt threat or malevolence, the cumulative effect of the subtle disturbances left her with a lingering sense of melancholy and introspection. On her final day, as she packed her belongings and prepared to leave the sanctuary that had both nurtured and disturbed her creativity, Elena took one last look around the cottage. In the fading light, she could almost hear the soft whispers of voices, echoes of a past that refused to be forgotten. As she drove away along the winding country road, the image of the secluded cottage receded into the distance, leaving her with a profound understanding that every place has its own story, and sometimes, the most unsettling tales are those that are woven into the fabric of human memory. The experience left her with an indelible mark, a bittersweet reminder that in seeking solitude, one might also discover the weight of history, and that every beautiful retreat may carry within it the hidden scars of a long-forgotten past. Tristan Caldwell had always been captivated by the allure of historic architecture. A young architect with ambitious dreams, he spent his evenings poring over old property listings in search of a project that would not only challenge his creative vision, but also serve as a testament to the enduring beauty of a bygone era. One rainy afternoon, while casually browsing Facebook Marketplace on his aging tablet, Tristan's eyes caught sight of an advertisement that made his heart skip a beat. The listing featured a sprawling Victorian house in the sleepy town of Waverley, offered at a price that defied logic. The photos showed elegant, albeit faded, details, a wraparound porch, ornate gingerbread trim, and tall, narrow windows with stained glass accents. The seller, who simply signed off as M. Harding, promised a quick as-is sale with no hidden fees. Though instinct told him that a deal this good was almost too perfect, Tristan's desire to own a piece of history overcame his hesitation. He arranged to see the property the very next day. The drive to Waverley was long and winding, with rain blurring the edges of the road and lending an almost cinematic quality to the journey. As Tristan approached the town, the landscape shifted from bustling suburbs to quiet, tree-lined streets. He parked near a modest general store and walked the remaining distance under a canopy of autumn leaves. When he finally saw the house, it loomed before him like a relic from another time. The building's once proud facade was now softened by layers of peeling paint and creeping ivy, yet every carved detail told a story. Tristan's heart pounded with excitement and trepidation as he stepped onto the creaking wooden porch. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with history. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that pierced through partially closed curtains. The parlor boasted a grand fireplace with an intricately carved mantel, and a staircase with a faded runner led to a labyrinth of rooms that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. Despite signs of neglect, the property retained an undeniable charm that Tristan knew could be revived with careful restoration. After a brief conversation with a reserved man who identified himself as M. Harding, a man whose lined face and weary eyes suggested years of regret, Tristan signed the necessary papers. With a modest sum exchanged and a receipt printed on thin paper in his hand, he felt as though he had just stepped into his dream. In the weeks that followed, Tristan dove headfirst into the renovation project. He spent long hours sketching designs, planning modern updates that would harmonize with the home's original character, and working with local craftsmen to repair the aging structure. As he meticulously restored ornate woodwork and repainted faded murals, he began to notice odd inconsistencies that could not be chalked up to mere wear and tear. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, he discovered a hidden compartment in the wall behind an old mirror. Inside, wrapped in yellowed newspaper clippings, was a bundle of letters and documents. The handwriting was elegant, the ink slightly smudged with age, and the content hinted at a bitter family dispute that had once torn the household apart. Names like Evelyn and Richard appeared repeatedly, along with dates that corresponded to a time of great personal tragedy. Though Tristan's logical mind urged him to view these as relics of a tumultuous past, an unsettling feeling began to take root in his chest. Late one evening, as the wind howled outside and rain tapped incessantly against the window panes, Tristan sat in the dim light of his newly established study. The old wooden desk creaked beneath his touch as he pored over the letters he had discovered. Each document painted a picture of a family in ruin, of greed, betrayal, and a mystery that had been deliberately buried beneath layers of time. He learned that the house had once belonged to a prominent family whose fortunes had crumbled amidst scandal and acrimony. The letters described a particularly dark chapter in the family's history. a dispute over an inheritance that had led to the mysterious disappearance of a beloved matriarch. The news, though distant, felt painfully immediate. As Tristan continued reading, the sound of the storm outside became a relentless backdrop, as if nature itself mourned the secrets held within these walls. Troubled by what he had learned, Tristan began to notice further oddities. Small objects moved inexplicably from one place to another, and the echo of soft voices seemed to linger in empty rooms after the day's work had ended. The once inviting corridors now carried an air of melancholy, as if the house itself resented the attempts to erase its history. Despite these unnerving signs, Tristan's determination to restore the property only grew stronger. He rationalized that every old house had its quirks, that the vibrations of a tragic past could be soothed by the promise of new beginnings. One particularly stormy night, when the power flickered and the house was plunged into intermittent darkness, Tristan decided to confront the mystery head-on. Clutching a flashlight and the bundle of letters, he retraced his steps through the silent hallways. In a forgotten study lined with dusty books, he uncovered a ledger tucked behind a heavy portrait. The ledger, its pages brittle and stained with time, recorded a series of transactions that involved large sums of money and names that matched those mentioned in the letters. The entries hinted at a deliberate attempt to liquidate the family's assets under duress, a last-ditch effort to rid themselves of the painful legacy. The revelation sent a chill through him. It was as if the very walls of the house were alive with the echoes of past greed and despair. Unable to shake the growing sense of foreboding, Tristan arranged a meeting with Ms. Lydia Prescott, a local historian known for her expertise in Waverly's troubled past. In a quiet corner of the town's modest library, surrounded by stacks of old newspapers and faded photographs, Lydia listened intently as Tristan recounted his discoveries. With a furrowed brow and a soft, measured tone, she confirmed that the house had indeed been at the center of a notorious scandal decades ago. The family, it turned out, had been ensnared in bitter legal battles and personal vendettas that culminated in a series of disappearances and a legacy of shame. Lydia's words, though delivered with a sense of scholarly detachment, resonated deeply with Tristan. The bargain he had so eagerly embraced now seemed fraught with hidden dangers and emotional burdens he had not anticipated. In the weeks that followed, the renovation project took on a dual purpose for Tristan. Not only did he seek to restore the physical beauty of the building, but he also felt compelled to honor its history, however dark it might be. He began incorporating elements of the original design that echoed the family's story. A small plaque engraved with a faded monogram here, a restored window that revealed a mural of once joyful scenes there. Yet, despite his efforts, an undercurrent of sorrow remained. The house, with all its restored splendor, still whispered of loss and regret, and Tristan found himself haunted by the thought that some memories, no matter how much one might wish to erase them, were destined to linger. As the project neared completion, Tristan stood alone on the wraparound porch one cool evening, watching the sunset bleed vibrant colors across the horizon. The renovation had transformed the house into a remarkable blend of old and new, a testament to his skill and vision. But as he took in the view, the weight of the past pressed upon him. The ledger, the letters, and the stories he had uncovered all converged into a single inescapable truth. The bargain he had struck was not merely a financial one. It was an inheritance of sorrow, a legacy of human frailty and betrayal that could never be fully disentangled from the beauty of the structure itself. In that quiet moment, Tristan made a silent vow. He would not allow the dark history of the bargain house to define its future. Instead, he resolved to transform it into a space that celebrated both resilience and remembrance, a living monument to the lessons learned from a past that, though painful, held the power to illuminate the path forward. With renewed determination, he stepped back inside, ready to complete the final touches on his restoration project. Months later, when the house was finally unveiled to the community, it stood as a testament to both architectural brilliance and the enduring impact of human stories. Neighbors and visitors marveled at the seamless blend of restored elegance and modern innovation, and many were drawn to the small plaques and preserved artifacts that hinted at the property's turbulent past. For Tristan, however, the true measure of his success was the quiet understanding that every object, every home, carried with it an intricate tapestry of memories, some beautiful, some heartbreaking. The bargain house had given him far more than a discounted property. It had provided him with a profound insight into the nature of legacy and the delicate balance between preserving history and forging a new future. And so, as he continued his work on new projects and shared his experience with fellow architects and collectors, Tristan carried with him the bittersweet memory of the house that once seemed like an irresistible opportunity and later revealed itself as an inheritance of secrets. The bargain house remained in his thoughts, a reminder that behind every attractive deal may lie a hidden story, and that the scars of the past can often be transformed into the strength needed to build something enduring. Juliana Cortland had always been drawn to forgotten things. As an aspiring photographer with a fascination for vintage aesthetics, she spent hours scouring flea markets, estate sales, and online marketplaces for objects with history, items that told stories without words. It was on a quiet Thursday evening, while absent-mindedly scrolling through Facebook Marketplace, that she stumbled upon an ad that made her heart skip a beat. 1968 Cadillac DeVille convertible, $4,500 OBO. Must sell ASAP. No lowball offers. The attached images showed a stunning turquoise convertible, its body still sleek despite years of neglect. Dust coated the surface, and the chrome details had dulled with age, but something about it captivated Juliana. She could almost hear the whispers of the past emanating from the worn leather seats and slightly rusted door handles. The seller, a man named Donovan Elridge, responded almost immediately to her message. His replies were brief, tinged with a strange urgency. He told her that the car had belonged to his late grandfather and had been sitting in storage for decades. Estate sale situation, he explained. I just need it gone. There was something about the way he phrased it. I just need it gone. That unsettled her. But the price was a steal, and she couldn't resist the opportunity. After a short exchange, they agreed to meet in person that Saturday morning in a parking lot on the outskirts of town. The air was crisp that morning, carrying the scent of damp earth and gasoline. Juliana pulled into the nearly empty lot, spotting the car immediately. It was parked beneath a weathered tarpaulin, its once vibrant color peeking through faded plastic sheeting. Donovan was already waiting, pacing slightly, his hands shoved into the pockets of his worn leather jacket. He was in his late 40s, with sunken eyes that suggested sleepless nights. When Juliana stepped out of her car, he barely greeted her, simply nodding toward the covered vehicle. Here she is, he said, pulling back the tarp in one swift motion. Even beneath layers of dust and time, the car was beautiful. The Cadillac had an undeniable presence, as if it still held echoes of the past within its frame. Juliana walked around it slowly, running her fingers over the cool metal, tracing the curves of the hood. Something about the car felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of something unspoken. Runs fine, Donovan muttered. New battery, fresh oil. Just hasn't been driven much. She glanced at him. Why are you selling it? Donovan hesitated. It's been in the family too long. His lips pressed into a thin line, as if he was resisting the urge to say more. You want it or not? Juliana hesitated. The car was stunning, but there was an unshakable tightness in her chest, as if something deep inside her was urging her to walk away. Still, she ignored it. She handed him the cash. The Cadillac rumbled to life with a low growl. Despite its age, it handled smoothly, the engine humming beneath her fingertips as she gripped the wheel. The leather seats creaked slightly under her weight, exhaling dust that carried the faint scent of old perfume, and something else, something musky, like aged paper or dried flowers. As she drove, she caught glimpses of something in the rearview mirror, a flicker of movement in the back seat, just at the edge of her vision. But every time she turned to check, there was nothing, just empty seats and the gentle reflection of passing streetlights. By the time she pulled into her driveway, the unease had settled deep in her bones. She dismissed it as nerves, excitement mixed with exhaustion. That was all. The next afternoon, Juliana decided to clean the car properly. Armed with a bucket, soap, and a vacuum, she spent hours restoring the Cadillac's former glory. The more she worked, the more it seemed to come alive, as if it were awakening from a long sleep. While wiping down the dashboard, she noticed something wedged deep inside the glove compartment, a folded piece of yellowed paper. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it free. The note was written in elegant cursive, the ink slightly smudged with time. For those who remember, let not the past be forgotten. The truth lies beneath. Beneath what? A cold chill ran down her spine. Over the next few days, her mind fixated on the note. Who had written it? What did it mean? Determined to find answers, she began digging into the history of the car. Through online archives and visits to the local library, Juliana traced the Cadillac's origins to the Elridge family, an influential but troubled lineage that had once owned much of the land outside town. Donovan's grandfather, Harold Elridge, had been the family patriarch, known for his strict control over family affairs. But what caught her attention was the story of Evelyn Elridge, Harold's wife. According to old newspaper articles, Evelyn had vanished without a trace in 1969. The official reports claimed she had left voluntarily, but rumors suggested something far darker. One witness had reportedly seen her arguing with Harold in front of the Cadillac just days before she disappeared. And then there was a detail that sent a jolt through Juliana's chest. Evelyn had last been seen wearing a turquoise dress, a shade almost identical to the Cadillac's paint. The truth lies beneath. A terrible thought took root in Juliana's mind. That night, unable to shake her suspicions, Juliana grabbed a flashlight and headed to the garage. The Cadillac loomed in the dim light, its once beautiful presence now feeling ominous. Heart pounding, she knelt beside the car and began inspecting the undercarriage. The metal frame was coated in decades of dirt and rust, but as she ran her hands along the underside, her fingers brushed against something unnatural. A seam, a section where the metal had been welded over. Dread pooled in her stomach. With shaking hands, she grabbed a small chisel and hammer from her toolbox and began scraping. The process was slow, painstaking, but after an hour of work, the metal finally gave way. A hollow space. An inside fabric. Turquoise fabric. The smell that hit her was overwhelming. Juliana stumbled back, gasping, her mind reeling. She didn't need to see more. She knew. She knew. The next morning, Juliana drove straight to the police station. She handed over everything. The note, the articles, the photographs of the concealed compartment beneath the Cadillac. The investigation that followed confirmed what she had feared. Human remains were found within the hidden cavity, wrapped in what was once a fine turquoise dress. Evelyn Elridge had never left. She had been there all along, entombed within the car she had once loved. Donovan, when confronted, refused to speak. Whether he had known or merely suspected the truth, no one could say. Juliana never drove the Cadillac again. She considered selling it, but deep down, she knew it belonged to Evelyn. In the end, she donated it to a museum, ensuring that its story, the real story, would not be forgotten. And sometimes, late at night, she still dreams of Evelyn. Of a woman in a flowing turquoise dress, standing beside the Cadillac, staring at her with something that almost resembled gratitude. Almost. Ben had been scrolling through Craigslist for weeks, looking for a good deal on a used dirt bike. He wasn't a professional rider, just someone who enjoyed weekend trails and the occasional race with his friends. New bikes were way out of his budget, so he resorted to the second-hand market, sifting through overpriced junk and obvious scams. Then he found it, a barely used KTM 450, listed for half of what it should have been worth. The seller's post was short. Need gone ASAP. Perfect condition. $2,200 OBO. There was only one picture, but from what Ben could tell, the bike looked solid. No visible rust, no dents, no major scratches. It was suspiciously cheap, but people made mistakes when they needed fast cash. He texted the number in the listing, expecting to be ignored or told it had already been sold. Instead, he got a response within minutes. Can meet tonight. Bring cash. The address was an hour away, out near the edge of town where farmland met forest. Ben hesitated. Buying things off Craigslist was always a gamble, but this was too good to pass up. He grabbed the cash from his savings and drove out as the sun dipped behind the horizon. By the time he reached the property, the sky was deep blue, the first hints of night creeping in. The place was isolated, surrounded by trees, with a gravel driveway leading up to a dimly lit barn. There was no house in sight, just the barn and a truck parked outside. Ben's headlights caught movement as a man stepped out of the barn, waving him forward. He looked to be in his late 40s, wearing a dirty flannel shirt and jeans. His posture was stiff, almost impatient. "You the one for the bike?" the man asked as Ben got out of his car. His voice was rough, like someone who smoked too much or didn't talk often. Ben nodded. "Yeah, I saw your post. Mind if I take a look?" The man turned without a word and walked toward the barn, leaving the door open for Ben to follow. The inside smelled of oil and old wood, a few dim bulbs casting long shadows along the walls. In the center of the space sat the bike, propped up on a stand. Ben's excitement surged. It was in even better condition than he expected. The tires were fresh, the chain clean, the bodywork nearly pristine. He crouched down, checking the suspension and brakes. "Why are you selling it?" he asked without looking up. "Needed the money," the man muttered. "Haven't ridden it in a while." Something in his tone was off. Ben couldn't place it, but there was an edge to the way he spoke, as if he was rushing through the conversation. Still, the deal was too good to overthink. "Would you take $2,000? Ben offered, pulling out the cash. The man hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, that's fine." He took the money quickly, stuffing it into his pocket, then stepped back. "Keys are in it. Got the title here." Ben signed the papers and pocketed the key, still half expecting something to go wrong. Deals like this didn't happen, but when he pushed the bike outside and fired it up, the engine roared to life, smooth and powerful. It felt real. It felt like he had just gotten away with something. "Appreciate it," Ben said as he strapped the bike into his truck bed. The man just nodded, already walking back toward the barn. No handshake, no small talk. As Ben pulled onto the gravel road, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The man was still standing in the doorway, watching him leave. Something about it unsettled him, but he pushed the feeling aside. He had a new bike, and that was all that mattered. The first ride was perfect. The suspension absorbed every bump, the throttle response was crisp, and the power was unlike anything Ben had ridden before. He took it to a dirt track the next morning, putting it through its paces, pushing harder with each lap. But by midday, things started to feel wrong. It was little things at first. The bike felt heavier than it should have, almost sluggish, like something was resisting him. Then the brakes started acting strange, responding slower than they should. He checked them twice, but there was nothing wrong. His friend Josh, an experienced rider, took it for a spin and shrugged. "Feels fine to me, dude. Maybe you're just overthinking it." Ben tried to shake it off, but the feeling stuck with him. The way the bike handled, the way it seemed to almost fight against him. It was like it had a mind of its own. He rode it for a few more days, but the unease only grew. It wasn't just the handling. At night, when the garage was quiet, he swore he could hear something, soft clicking noises, almost like metal shifting, but deeper, like a heartbeat in the frame. Once, when he walked past it in the dark, he thought he saw something drip from the engine. Not oil, not coolant, something darker, thicker. But in the morning, there was nothing there. Just a spotless floor and a perfectly normal bike. He convinced himself he was imagining things, that his mind was playing tricks on him. But then came the crash. It happened on a familiar trail, one he had ridden 100 times before. The turn wasn't sharp, the terrain wasn't difficult, yet when he went to lean into the curve, the bike refused. It jerked the opposite way, yanking him off balance. He barely had time to react before he was airborne, the world spinning as he crashed hard into the dirt. His helmet saved him, but his shoulder took the worst of it, a deep, searing pain shooting down his arm. When he finally looked up, the bike was upright. Not on its side like it should have been. It was standing perfectly still, as if someone had set it there. Waiting. Watching. Ben's breath came fast and ragged as he pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain. He wasn't riding it back. He wasn't touching it again. He called Josh, who arrived 20 minutes later with his truck. "Dude, what happened?" Josh asked, looking at the scene. "You wipe out." Ben didn't answer. He just pointed at the bike. "Help me load it. I'm getting rid of it." That night, he put it up for sale. No price. Just best offer. Need gone ASAP. The messages came fast, just like before. Desperate buyers, eager for the deal of a lifetime. Ben picked the first one who offered cash, and told them to come right away. The guy showed up at midnight. He didn't ask questions, didn't test the bike. Just handed over the money, loaded it up, and drove off. Ben watched him go, standing in the darkness of his driveway. Relief washed over him. It was gone. But as he turned to go inside, his phone buzzed with a new message. No name, No number. Just one sentence. It always comes back. Ryan had been searching for a cheap but reliable laptop. His old one barely functioned, freezing every few minutes and crashing at the worst possible times. He needed something for work, but his budget was tight. Buying a brand new laptop wasn't an option, so he turned to Facebook Marketplace. After a few days of searching, he finally found what looked like an unbelievable deal. A nearly new MacBook Pro for only $300. The seller's description was short. Barely used. Selling cheap because I need the cash. Works perfectly. There were 3 pictures attached. The laptop looked flawless, no scratches, no signs of wear. It seemed too good to be true. Ryan was skeptical. Good deals existed, but this was pushing it. He checked the listing again, expecting to find comments from other buyers, but there were none. It had been posted that morning and was still available. If it was real, it wouldn't last long. He messaged the seller. "Hey, is this still available?" The response came almost immediately. "Yes. Can you pick it up tonight?" Ryan hesitated. He had bought things off Marketplace before, but this felt rushed. Most sellers took time to respond. The immediate reply felt eager. But he convinced himself that maybe the seller really just needed the money. "Yeah, I can pick it up," Ryan replied. "Where are you located?" The seller sent an address. It wasn't in a residential area. It was behind an old shopping center on the far side of town. That made Ryan pause. Why meet there? Why not at a coffee shop or a gas station like normal? Why that location? Ryan asked. The reply was blunt. "Don't want people coming to my house. Safer this way." Ryan understood that. He had met sellers in parking lots before. Not everyone wanted strangers knowing where they lived. He decided it wasn't a red flag. "Okay, I'll be there at 8. The seller responded with a thumbs-up emoji. As the time approached, Ryan felt uneasy. He had a weird feeling about this, but he ignored it. He needed a laptop, and this was the best deal he'd found. He grabbed $300 in cash and drove out to the meeting spot. The shopping center had been mostly abandoned for years, with only a liquor store and a laundromat still operating. The parking lot was dimly lit, the few working streetlights casting long, flickering shadows. A single white sedan was parked near the back, its headlights off. Ryan's phone buzzed. A message from the seller. "I'm here." Ryan pulled up a few spaces away and got out. The man stepped out of the sedan. He was tall and thin, wearing a hoodie and jeans. His face was partially hidden under the hood, and he moved stiffly. In his right hand, he held a laptop bag. "You Ryan?" the man asked. "Yeah," Ryan said cautiously. The man unzipped the bag and pulled out the MacBook. It looked just like the pictures. Ryan took it, flipped it open, and powered it on. The Apple logo appeared. The system loaded quickly. Everything seemed fine. "Why are you selling it so cheap?" Ryan asked. The man hesitated for a moment. Then he shrugged. "Just don't need it anymore." Ryan glanced at him. Something about this guy seemed off. The way he stood, the way he barely spoke. But the laptop worked, and the deal was too good to pass up. He handed over the $300. The man took the cash quickly, shoved it into his pocket, and turned to leave without another word. Ryan got back in his car, watching the man walk back to his sedan. As soon as Ryan started his engine, the man did the same. He pulled out of the lot and disappeared into the night. Ryan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Something about the exchange had unsettled him, but he couldn't put his finger on why. When he got home, he sat on his couch and started setting up the laptop. It was wiped clean, just as the seller had said. He connected to his Wi-Fi and began downloading his usual apps. That's when he noticed something strange. The cursor moved by itself, just slightly, a small twitch. Ryan frowned. Maybe the trackpad was dirty or faulty. He wiped it down and kept going. A few minutes later, it happened again. This time, it wasn't subtle. The cursor dragged across the screen and clicked on a random folder. Ryan's stomach tightened. He disconnected from the Wi-Fi. Maybe there was a remote access program installed. He opened the system settings and checked the users. There was only one account. His. That didn't make sense. If someone had hacked it, there should have been some trace. Then the screen flickered, just for a second. But in that brief moment, Ryan saw something. A reflection? A face? The screen went black before he could tell. His heart pounded. He He told himself it was just his imagination. He was tired, seeing things. When the laptop rebooted, he noticed something even stranger. A new folder had appeared on the desktop. It was labeled with today's date. He hadn't made that folder. He clicked on it. Inside were dozens of images. They were all pictures of him. Some were from earlier that night, sitting on his couch, walking to his car, meeting the seller. His blood ran cold. These weren't pictures he had taken. Someone had been watching him. A message popped up on the screen. "Enjoy your new laptop." Ryan slammed the lid shut. His hands were shaking. He grabbed his phone and tried to call the seller. The number was disconnected. His mind raced. Had the laptop been streaming him the whole time? He yanked the power cable and threw the laptop into a drawer. He would deal with it in the morning. But that night, as he lay in bed, his phone buzzed. A new message. No number. No name. It was a picture. Of him. Sleeping. Ryan's breath hitched. His heart pounded in his chest. He turned his phone off and sat up in the darkness. His eyes darted around the room. Was someone outside? Was someone watching? Slowly, he got out of bed and crept to his window. He hesitated before pulling back the curtain. The street was empty, but something felt wrong. He grabbed the laptop from the drawer and took it outside. He placed it on the pavement and grabbed a hammer from his toolbox. Without hesitation, he swung. The screen shattered. He kept swinging until the entire device was a broken mess of glass and metal. The messages stopped. The pictures never appeared again. But even now, Ryan still wonders. Who had been watching? And were they still out there? Nathan had been searching for a new couch for weeks. His old one was worn out, the fabric torn in places, and the cushions had lost all support. He didn't want to spend a fortune on a brand new one, so he turned to Facebook Marketplace. He scrolled through countless listings, most of them overpriced or in terrible condition, until he finally found the perfect one. A nearly new, dark gray sectional couch for only $200. The pictures showed a spotless couch, the cushions still full and plush. The seller's description was brief. Moving and need this gone ASAP. No stains, no pets, no smoking. First come, first serve. The listing had been posted only an hour ago, and there were no comments yet. It seemed too good to be true, but Nathan decided to take a chance. He messaged the seller. "Hey, is this still available?" The reply came almost instantly. "Yes. Can you pick it up tonight?" Nathan hesitated. It was already late, past 9 p.m., and picking up furniture in the dark wasn't ideal. But if he waited until morning, someone else might take it. He decided to go for it. "Yeah, I can come now. What's the address?" The seller sent an address about 20 minutes away, in an unfamiliar part of town. It was a residential neighborhood, but not one Nathan had ever been to. "Just pull up out front," the seller wrote. "I'll be waiting." Nathan grabbed his keys, borrowed his friend's truck, and set off. As he drove, he felt a small nagging feeling in the back of his mind. Something about the situation felt off. Maybe it was just the late hour, or the fact that the seller was so eager to get rid of the couch. When he arrived, he realized the house was dark. No lights were on inside. The only light came from a dim street lamp casting long shadows across the driveway. A large, covered porch extended out from the front door, but no one was there. Nathan parked and texted the seller. "I'm here." A few seconds later, a response. "Come around back. Garage is open." Nathan frowned. That was unusual. Most people selling furniture would have it near the door, ready to be taken. He got out of the truck and walked toward the side of the house. As he reached the backyard, he saw the garage door half open. A single, flickering light bulb illuminated the space inside. "Hello," Nathan called. No answer. He hesitated. His gut was telling him to turn around and leave. But $200 for a couch like that? It was worth at least $1,000 brand new. He stepped inside. The garage was nearly empty, except for the couch sitting in the center of the concrete floor. It looked exactly like the pictures, clean, well-maintained. But something about it seemed wrong. Then he noticed the smell. A faint, musty odor, like something damp that had been locked away for too long. He reached out and pressed down on one of the cushions. It was firm. Too firm. He lifted the cushions. Nothing underneath. Just an ordinary couch. "Hey, I'm here for the couch," he called out again. No response. Nathan pulled out his phone and checked the messages. He sent another text. I'm in the garage. Where are you? 3 dots appeared, showing that the seller was typing. Then the message popped up. I see you. A chill ran down Nathan's spine. His eyes darted around the garage. No one was there. He typed back. Where are you? No reply. The dots appeared again, then stopped. Nathan's breathing quickened. He turned to leave, but as he stepped toward the garage door, something creaked behind him. He spun around. The couch had moved. Just an inch, but enough to notice. Nathan's heartbeat pounded in his ears. He told himself it was his imagination, a trick of the dim lighting. He reached for his phone again, but before he could type, something underneath the couch shifted. A slight, almost imperceptible movement. Then a whisper. A voice so soft it barely reached his ears. Help me. Nathan stumbled back. He hadn't imagined that. The voice had come from inside the couch. He grabbed the nearest tool he could find, a rusted crowbar leaning against the wall, and slowly approached. His hands were shaking as he wedged the crowbar between the couch's wooden frame and pried it open. The moment it cracked open, a foul stench filled the air. Inside, crammed into the hollow space beneath the cushions, was a person. A woman. Her wrists and ankles were bound with duct tape, her mouth covered. Her wide, terrified eyes locked onto his. Nathan scrambled to remove the tape, his fingers fumbling. It's okay, I've got you, he whispered, his own voice shaking. He had no idea how long she had been trapped in there, how she was still breathing. The moment the tape was off her mouth, she gasped for air. He's still here. Nathan froze. A footstep echoed behind him. Before he could turn around, something heavy struck the back of his head. The world spun. He hit the cold concrete floor, vision blurring. As his consciousness faded, the last thing he saw was the seller's face peering down at him. Smiling, Nathan woke up in complete darkness. His arms and legs were bound, his mouth covered in tape. He was no longer in the garage. He was inside something small, confined. The air was thick and stale. Then he realized he was inside the couch. A new listing appeared on Facebook Marketplace the next morning. For sale, one used couch. No stains, no pets, no smoking. Must pick up at night. David had been searching for a vintage motorcycle for months. Ever since he was a teenager, he had dreamed of restoring one to its former glory. And now, with a decent paycheck and some extra time on his hands, he was finally ready. He scoured Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace every day, looking for the perfect deal. Most of the bikes were either too expensive or too far gone to restore, but then one evening he found it. A 1974 Honda CB 750. The listing had only been up for an hour. The pictures showed a bike that was dusty and a little rusted, but in surprisingly good condition for its age. The description was brief. Bike belonged to my brother. He passed away, and I just need it gone. Selling cheap because I don't want to deal with buyers haggling. $500 firm. David knew what he was looking at. Even in rough condition, a bike like that could easily sell for a few $1,000s. $500 was an absolute steal. It almost seemed too good to be true, but he didn't want to risk losing it. He messaged the seller immediately. Hey, I'm very interested in the bike. Is it still available? A response came within seconds. Yes. Can you pick it up tonight? David hesitated. It was already after 10 p.m., and the address was nearly an hour away, out in a rural area. But this was the deal of a lifetime. He had a truck. He had cash. If he waited until morning, someone else would take it. He made up his mind. Yeah, I can come now. What's the address? The seller sent the location, a farmhouse just outside a small town David had never heard of. When you get here, just pull around back to the barn. That was a little unusual. Most sellers met buyers out front or in a driveway. But it was late, and maybe the seller didn't want to wake up their family. It made sense. At least, that's what David told himself. He grabbed his truck keys, loaded up his ramps and tie-downs, and headed out. As he drove, the roads became more isolated. The street lights disappeared, and soon, the only light came from his headlights cutting through the darkness. His GPS led him onto a narrow, gravel road that stretched into nothingness. After what felt like forever, he saw the house. It was old, but still standing strong, with a long dirt driveway leading up to it. There were no other cars. No porch light. Just a large barn standing off to the side. David pulled in slowly, gravel crunching under his tires. He texted the seller. "I'm here." No response. He waited, fingers drumming against the steering wheel. A minute passed. Then another. The barn doors were slightly open. A single light flickered inside, casting long shadows. David sighed. Maybe the seller had fallen asleep. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out of the truck, the night air thick and silent around him. He walked toward the barn. "Hello." No answer. He hesitated at the entrance, shining his flashlight inside. The barn was mostly empty, except for some old tools, wooden crates, and in the center of the floor, the motorcycle. It was just like in the pictures, dusty but intact. The chrome was dull, the tires were flat, but it was all there. David felt a rush of excitement. This was real. He pulled out his phone to text the seller again. But before he could type, a new message popped up. "Go ahead and load it up. I'm inside the house." David frowned. That was weird. Most sellers wanted to at least meet the buyer. Exchange a few words. Maybe talk about the bike. But if they didn't care, fine. He just wanted the bike and to get out of there. He stepped closer and crouched down to inspect the engine. That's when he noticed something strange. The dust pattern on the tank was smudged, as if someone had recently touched it with bare hands. But there were no fresh fingerprints. Just streaks. Long, uneven streaks, like something had been dragged across the surface. A deep unease settled in his chest. He straightened up, suddenly very aware of how silent everything was. No wind, no insects, just the quiet hum of his truck idling in the distance. Then his phone buzzed again. A new message. Just one word. "Run." David's stomach twisted. He turned toward the house. The curtains in one of the windows shifted. Someone was watching him. He didn't think. He just moved. He sprinted back to his truck, his boots kicking up dirt and gravel. As he reached for the door handle, he heard footsteps, heavy, fast, coming from behind the barn. Something metallic scraped against the ground. A sharp, grating sound that sent ice down his spine. David yanked the door open and threw himself inside. He slammed the lock down just as something crashed into the side of the truck. Hard. He barely had time to register the impact before he saw it. A figure, tall and broad, standing just outside his driver's side window. He couldn't make out a face, only the outline, the way it loomed over him. The sound of metal dragged against metal. Then he saw what was in its hand. A long, rusted chain. David didn't wait. He jammed the keys into the ignition, the engine roaring to life. Tires spun against the dirt as he floored it, the truck fishtailing before catching traction. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. As he sped down the gravel road, his phone buzzed one last time. A message from the seller. "Sorry, I couldn't warn you sooner." David never looked for motorcycles on Craigslist again. Lena had been searching for a used kayak for weeks. Living near the lake, she had always wanted one, but new models were expensive. She scrolled through Facebook Marketplace until she found the perfect deal. An orange touring kayak, barely used, for only $150. The listing was simple. Selling my kayak. Only used a few times. Need it gone ASAP. The seller's name was simply listed as Dan, no last name. No profile picture. That should have been her first red flag. She sent a quick message. "Hey, is this still available?" The reply came almost immediately. "Yes. Can you pick it up tonight?" Lena hesitated. It was already past 9 p.m., and the pickup location was nearly an hour away, down by the river. Most sellers met in a public place, but this one wanted her to come to his dock. That seemed odd. Still, it was a great deal, and she didn't want to miss out. "Sure," she replied. "What's the address?" A pin dropped in her messages, marking a remote spot near the river bend. No house nearby. Just an isolated dock in the middle of nowhere. Lena felt uneasy, but convinced herself it was fine. Maybe Dan lived on a boat or had a cabin nearby. She grabbed her keys and headed out. The drive was long, the roads becoming narrower the further she went. The streetlights disappeared, replaced by endless stretches of trees. Eventually, she turned onto a dirt road leading toward the water. Her headlights caught the glimmer of the river up ahead, the dock barely visible in the darkness. She parked and texted Dan, "I'm here." No response. She waited a minute, then stepped out of the car, the cool night air wrapping around her. The only sound was the gentle lapping of water against the dock. She shone her flashlight toward the river. The kayak was there, resting on the wooden planks. But something was wrong. It was wet, dripping, as if it had just been pulled from the water. Lena's stomach twisted. Maybe Dan had taken it out for one last paddle. That would explain why he wasn't responding. Maybe he was drying off. But why leave the kayak unattended? She stepped closer. A faint metallic scent reached her nose. She thought it was just the damp wood, but as she moved her light across the kayak, she saw something dark streaked across the plastic hull. Red, smudged in long, uneven streaks. Her pulse quickened. She turned back toward her car, reaching for her phone to call someone, anyone. Before she could dial, her screen lit up. A new message from Dan. "Take the kayak. Go. Now." Lena's hands trembled as she typed. "What's going on?" The typing bubble appeared, then disappeared. Then another message came through. "He's coming." A branch snapped behind her. Lena spun around, her flashlight beam cutting through the trees. Nothing moved, just shadows stretching between the trunks. The sound of water shifted. Something was moving near the river. A slow ripple. Then another. Lena's breath hitched. She wasn't alone. The kayak rocked slightly, as if something had brushed against it from underneath. A low scraping sound followed, something dragging against the wooden dock. Then footsteps. Not from the trees. From the water. A figure emerged from the river, dripping and silent, its movements unnaturally smooth. Its head was tilted as if observing her. Watching. Lena didn't wait. She sprinted toward her car, fumbling with the handle as she yanked the door open. She jumped in, slammed the lock down, and turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life just as something heavy slammed against the rear of the car. She didn't look back. She threw it into reverse, tires skidding over the dirt as she backed out onto the road. She sped away, heart pounding, barely able to breathe. The road twisted through the trees, but she didn't slow down. She didn't stop until she was miles away, pulling into a gas station parking lot where there were lights and people. Her phone buzzed one last time. A final message from Dan. "Sorry. I tried to warn you." Lena never went near that river again.